Greetings. I'm excited to share this bonus content with you that addresses Social Security benefit claiming strategies for married filers. Now, this comes to really two main factors as we think about how to do this well. One is the mathematics of this. We've got to think about the income streams and the optimal strategy when we think about your expected lifetime, as we think about the income streams and how those fit in and where to go about that. The second piece, though, is that we need to think a little bit about the psychology of making that decision as well. So that first piece we'll dive into there. Just a quick reminder, we went through an overview of Social Security benefits in a former video, in our core video content. Feel free to reference that. We're not going to go back through all of that, but just a reminder of kind of the way that you can claim benefits here overall. So your full retirement age is that age where you could claim your primary insurance amount benefit from Social Security. So that's kind of that core benefit. If you claim earlier, then you take a haircut on those benefits. If you defer later than your full retirement age, then you actually have a step up and have a higher level of benefit based on those deferred credits. So if we think about that, if your full retirement age is age 67, and you would get $1,500 on a month-to-month basis at age 67, if you claim at age 62, 5 years earlier, you're taking a haircut of about 6% each year that you claim earlier. So you only get 30% of the benefit if you claim as early as you can. So that would only be $1,050 on a month-to-month basis. Now, by contrast, if you deferred that benefit 3 years, you have a step up of 8% per year that you defer that you defer taking those benefits. So you get $1,860 of income on a month-to-month basis if you defer over 3 years in this scenario. So you can see the difference is 77% from claiming at age 62 to claiming out at age 70. Now, obviously, if you knew that you were going to pass away at age 64, then claim the benefits as early as you can, because at least you get some benefits for those first couple of years. By contrast, if you knew that you're going to live to 105, then deferring those benefits and claiming at age 70 probably makes a lot of sense, because you have such a higher level of benefit for 35 years there. But the reality is, of course, none of us knows how long we have. And so we have to think about the mathematics of this and use some statistical analysis as we do so. Now, here's where we would tend to start with an individual filer. We do this kind of break-even analysis where we say, okay, if you take the benefit as early as you can, then by age 70 in this circumstance, and this is a guy named Joe, and he, the earliest that he could take, of course, would be 62, his primary insurance amount of about $2,500 a month. If you look at this break-even chart, if he passed away at age 70, if he claimed benefits as early as he could, he would have had about $200,000 worth of benefits. So obviously, if he knew that he would pass away at 70, claim those benefits as early as he can. At about age 81, in this example, you can see that the overall level of benefit that would be paid out from that time period would be about the same, regardless of whether he claimed as early as he could at age 62, or if he claimed at age 70. Now, if he lived out to age 100, certainly deferring those benefits to age 70 would make the most sense from a financial perspective from what we see here in this break-even chart. The problem with doing this for folks who are married is that break-evens break down, as we like to say. There are 9 different whole year election ages for spouse 1. There are 9 whole year election ages for spouse 2. There are also 12 months in each of those whole years. So you've got 108 different possibilities for each spouse. And then you multiply those together, you've got over 10,000 different possible claiming strategies there. So a lot of different potential and a lot of complexity. So we can't just look at a two-dimensional break-even chart to make sense of this. Now, again, if we thought about that two-dimensional chart, one of the other things that we need to factor in is the time value of money. Now, I always caution folks that we don't need to be factoring in something like 8 or 10% here, the rate of return that you might see in a healthy stock market. Instead, what we need to do is look at a more steady rate of return that maybe you would receive, in a bond portfolio that wouldn't have nearly as much risk. Maybe you have 3% or something like that would be a core time value of money estimate, because Social Security gives you that cost of living adjustment, and it's been consistent over a long period of time. So typically, as we look at that, if we factor in time value of money, you can see here expected longevity on the horizontal axis and the expected rate of return here. Obviously, if you could get 100% rate of return every year, you want to claim at age 62 because you want to get those resources doubling every year as quickly as you can. Now, that's not going to happen. And my point, again, is that we shouldn't even be looking at 5, 6, 7, 8%. There is our time value of money estimate, something more like 3% or maybe even 4% on the high side. So that usually amounts to a break-even point of about age 83 for an individual filer. Now, for couples, it's different though. If we think about the probability of living at least to a particular age, for gentlemen, if you're age 62 and we look at Social Security's statistical overview of this, you have a 93% chance of living to 67, an 87% chance of living to 70, a 70% chance of living to 77, a 57% chance of living to 81, and finally a 22% chance of living all the way out to age 90. Now, in talking with actuaries who really dive deeply into the data on this and do a lot of work for life insurance companies and other financial firms, talking with a few actuaries, their feedback has been that we really need to expect clients who are in our demographic for service to live something like 4 or 5 years longer on average than what we see here. And the reason being is that the clients that we serve tend to have a higher level of affluence, a higher level of access to healthcare, and a higher level of education. So that trifecta usually means that we need to add 4 or 5 years into our expectations at a core level. Now, if we meet with a client who has family that lives a long time, their people live a long time, typically have longevity in their genes seemingly, and are in good health, then we might add to what we see here. If we have, by contrast, someone who has had some health challenges, maybe has illness or something that they're dealing with there that may significantly reduce their life expectancy, then we need to adjust in the other direction. If we look at ladies there, for an individual woman, if she is 62, living out to age 67, she has a 96% chance, again, via the Social Security demographic statistical elements. If we look at age 70, she has a 92% chance to live out there, an 80% chance to live to 77, and finally a 69% chance to live out to age 81. And then a 1/3 chance of living to age 90 there. Now, if we have a married couple, husband, wife, at least one of them living out to age 67, it's actually a 99% chance. Still a 99% chance of living out to age 70, a 94% chance that at least one spouse will live to 77, an 87% chance that one lives to 81, and then a 48% chance of living out to age 90. Now, if we add 4 or 5 years to each of these, what you would note there is that if we're thinking about that break-even point, oftentimes of being in your early 80s, maybe 81, 82, 83, depending on how we look at the time value of money, then there's about a 70% chance, best we can tell, based on the feedback that we've received from actuaries for our kind of core clients, about a 70% chance that gentlemen might live into their early 80s, an 80% chance that an individual female might live into her early 80s. And then finally, a 94% chance for a married couple to live, for one of them to live into their early 80s would be, again, kind of the rough estimates that we use. So a high likelihood of getting there, we look at even living into having one spouse at least live into their 90s, being a higher than 50% chance there. So we take that statistically, and then of course we have conversations with clients and think about things like health concerns or longevity and family, and try to make sense of the best path to go forward. Now, a couple things to bear in mind here. The survivor is generally going to receive the higher level of benefit between the couple there. So if we have one spouse who has a higher earnings history, it often makes sense for him or her to defer their benefits out to age 70 because it's protective for both spouses. If either spouse passes away, the survivor is going to have that higher benefit for life with a cost of living adjustment. So it can be very, very helpful. Second thing to bear in mind, 80% of women survive their husbands on average for 14 years. 80% of women survive their husbands on average for 14 years. So this is a significant way that we can be able to help that survivor, not just maybe for a year or two, but for a decade or more there. Finally, 98% of widow benefit recipients are women. Okay, so we need to make sure that as we think about this, that we're doing a good job of providing for that survivor. If the survivor is particularly a female, females tend to live longer than males. And so we need to really pay attention to the benefit claiming strategies there. Now, how do you qualify for spousal benefits? You may not be aware of this, but if you've been married for at least a year, and you have the primary worker, so the worker with the higher earnings history has filed, then you may be able to file and qualify for a spousal benefit. Now, that spousal benefit essentially is going to be 50% of the value of the primary worker's benefit based on their primary insurance amount. And this isn't going to apply to any kind of deferred credits. We'll get into that for just a moment, but if you don't qualify for the benefit on your own, or your benefit is not as high as your spouse's benefit, it's not as high as 50% of your spouse's benefit, then you can have that spousal benefit, and you can get at least half of the benefit of your spouse there. So it's up to 50% of your spouse's primary insurance amount. That's not the benefit amount, it's the primary insurance amount. So spousal benefits, some of the characteristics here that we need to make sure that you're aware of. First, they're reduced on a faster schedule if you're filing early. So if your full retirement age is 66 and you claim benefits at age 62, then you have a lower amount of the primary insurance amount than you would be if you were claiming based on your own earnings history. So there's more of it's a steeper haircut. You only get 70% of those benefits if you're claiming 4 years early, whereas you would get 75% if it was based on your own earnings history. Perhaps even more important here is to remember that if you are claiming on a spousal benefit and you defer beyond your full retirement age, you don't get the deferred credits of 8% every year that you would if you're claiming on your own earnings history. So that example that we looked at earlier, where if you claim at age 67, you get a certain amount, but if you claim at age 70, you get 8% more per year, or 24% more total, and that can make a significant difference. That doesn't happen for spousal benefits. So we need to make sure that you know there's no delayed credits on spousal benefits. So let's look at an analysis here and kind of give you an example that may help. Let's say we have Jim, who's born January 2nd, 1962. Betty, because we're being really, really creative here, was born on the same day 3 years later. We're planning that Jim, his longevity goes out to age 87, that Betty's goes to 91. We'll say that Jim's earnings history is a little bit higher, his primary insurance amount of $3,000, full retirement age if he claims at that point. Now, Betty's would be a little bit less. It'd be $2,000 on a month-to-month, still a strong benefit there, but $2,000 a month if she claims at her full retirement age. So there's a significant value difference here. First, overall, you can see that both of them were planning that they're getting out into their late 80s or early 90s. So they've crossed that threshold of getting beyond age 81, 82, 83. So it's probably not surprising as we look at the analysis, and we do use some proprietary software to go through this to make sure that we look at all the different claiming strategies. We use Social Security timing, and so that's where this report comes from. So there is a significant difference here in terms of the value based on claiming early versus claiming later and deferring credits. If we look at the recommended strategy, it would be that Jim defers claiming benefits out to age 70 and that Betty defers claiming benefits out to age 69. So that recommended strategy would be such that if they live again to 87 and 91 respectively, that they would have received over $1,149,000 of total benefits over that time. Now, if they claim just as early as they could, they would only receive $1,047,000 and change worth of benefits. So there's a pretty substantial difference in here, over $100,000 in terms of those claiming strategies, if we think about the ages that we're projecting them out to. Now, part of that, again, is because Jim passes away, there's a 3-year age gap, and then Betty, naturally, we're projecting that she lives another 4 years overall. So there's 7 years that she survives Jim in this circumstance. And if he defers out to age 70, those deferred credits will stack up, and then they will accrue to her in terms of that benefit, because she will have the higher benefit when he passes away that she will sustain. So a lot going on there. We'll dive into some additional specifics. So Jim would claim at age 70 again, his benefits would begin, and they would be about $4,700 on a month-to-month basis. Betty would defer to age 69. Her benefits would be about $3,100 on a month-to-month basis in this example. You can see this is the new break-even chart. It's not just two-dimensional in the sense of the crossover line, but really looking at Jim's life expectancy on the horizontal axis there and Betty's life expectancy on the vertical axis. Now, if they claim as early as possible, that would be the red dots there. If they claim out to their suggested strategy, that would be the blue dots where they would shine. So again, if we looked at age 70, if both of them passed away at age 70, you can see the red dot there. And that would indicate take as early as you can. Both of you claim benefits at age 62. Probably no surprise, if both of them live out to age 100, they should both defer the benefits as far as they can. But the interesting piece, or one of them, is those other potential outcomes, like Jim passes away, say at age 75, and Betty lives out to age 90. Well, believe it or not, claiming the benefits earlier would make the most sense in that circumstance. But if we look again at that base case where we say Jim lives to 91 and Betty, or Jim lives out to 87, I should say, and Betty lives out to 91, somewhere in this range, you can see that the optimal strategy is for Jim to defer to 70 and Betty to defer to 69. So what if we said, what if they said, well, we don't want to have both of us defer that long. That just seems like if we passed away suddenly, that we wouldn't get any kind of benefits there. Well, we can look at an alternate strategy here, and this would be kind of that splitting up of the two approaches. One where we could have Betty claiming at age 62, so they do get some benefit coming in earlier. Instead of getting $2,000 on a month-to-month basis, she would only be getting $1,500 in this scenario. And then Jim deferring out to age 70, so that this would again be protective for Betty going forward. So if he should pass away at age 72, then she starts to take over his benefits and her benefits go away. If we look at that alternate strategy, and now we say that the green dots are where the alternate strategy really shines, the blue dots again are where the best strategy would be that deferral to age 70 and 69 respectively. And then you can still see that there are red dots there where claiming the earliest possible would make the most sense. Again, probably no surprise, but if we look at age 75, if both of them pass away at age 75, still it makes sense for both of them to claim just as early as they can. But we see something different here in these green regions. So if Jim only lives to 75, but now we see Betty live out to 85, well, now it makes the most sense for Betty to have taken her benefits as early as she can, but Jim to defer benefits, and then Betty would have inherited his benefits or taken over that income stream when he passed away. Same thing if Betty predeceased Jim and she only lived to 75 and Jim lived out to 85 or 90 or even age 100, still would be the better claiming strategy there. Now, probably no surprise, but if both of them live out into their 90s, then still deferring benefits as long as they can makes a great deal of sense there. So a lot of different potential strategies. If we think about a strategy comparison, and this is again looking at longevity of 91 for Betty, 87 for Jim, you can see that recommended strategy of deferring benefits is still the highest, but the splitting up of the strategy isn't too far behind that. It's only about $27,000 behind. And so sometimes clients will say, well, I don't want to defer benefits for both of us that long. Let's do that split strategy and we'll get at least some income going, and that'll help us on a day-to-day basis. Now, what I come back to often here is that there is a mathematical component that we've just gone through, and we can look at the probabilities, we can look at the best trajectory and incorporate that with the financial plan. We do have to look at the psychological component there as well. And this, I would liken it to, in some small way, to the groundbreaking research that Walter Mischel did at Stanford in the 1960s on delayed gratification with youngsters. So his experiment, again, was that he put a marshmallow in front of an elementary school child and said that if the child could eat the marshmallow whenever he or she wanted to, but if the child waited for 15 minutes, then the child would be able to eat 2 marshmallows. And then Mischel or whoever was performing the test would leave the room for 15 minutes and would come back. And again, after 15 minutes, if the marshmallow had been eaten, then that was it. But if it had not, then the child would get 2 marshmallows. In some ways, this comes back to that psychological component for all of us of that delayed gratification. It's not an easy thing. It takes a level of discipline. It even takes a level of financial planning, because we have to say, well, where's the income going to come from to live on, if not from Social Security early in retirement? Oftentimes, what we can do is plan to take distributions from other accounts so that you can defer taking benefits from Social Security out to, your late 60s or early or right around age 70. Now, that takes some planning, but if we look at that, there are a number of benefits. First, we can see the mathematical benefit here. There is actually typically even a tax benefit, that the larger amount of Social Security, if you defer later, oftentimes there's a better tax treatment for you in that strategy and approach as well. But it also gives a solidity to the plan if we defer Social Security, because as I remind clients, if we think about rates of return over the next 5 years, we certainly don't know those, but there's a tighter range, perhaps, of the rate of return and range of outcomes that we might see over the next 5 years over what we might see over the next 30 years. So if we think about taking those accounts and using some of them over the next 5 years, again, we're not going to know exactly the rate of return, but it'll be closer to kind of a core baseline. If we think about deferring Social Security benefits and taking income from our accounts in the near term, that kind of gives us a higher level of Social Security benefits, a greater solidity of the plan going forward. By contrast, if we take the Social Security benefits as early as we can, that means that we're going to get less in an amount of benefits later on, and we're going to have to take more from our investment accounts later on. If we take more from our investment accounts later on, the range of outcomes is going to be wider. If we think about what might happen over the next 15 or 20 or 30 years, we have less of a level of certainty there than over certainly the next couple of years there. So I hope that provides some education and a foundation from which to think about Social Security claiming options and strategies. If you're working with our team, providing those Social Security projections from the Social Security Administration is a key next step. And what we'll do is use that proprietary software to be able to make sure that we can incorporate the trade-offs into your plan and walk through a claiming strategy that makes the most sense for you. With that, thanks for joining us and take care.
This content was provided by Retirement Planning Services. We're in Knoxville, Tennessee, and you can visit our website at www.seriousretirement.com. The information in this recording is intended for general educational and informational purposes only and should not be construed as investment advisory, financial planning, legal, tax, or other professional advice based on your specific situation. Please consult with your professional advisor before taking any action based on its contents.